Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today is issue day at Soluble on this Friday, and the subject for this issue day is climate change and how it's affecting the everyday lives of Americans, and what, if anything, we as humans who are causing it can possibly or most certainly do about it. Now, there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than at any time in human history. And a great amount of it, a great deal of it, is due to human activity. There has been a while back, I don't know exactly the year or how long ago it goes back, but a once upon a time vice president first brought it to America's hardcore attention through a documentary called The Inconvenient Truth by former Vice President Al Gore. We kind of, brushed it off, shrugged it off as no big deal. It's so far down the road that, we could always, give it some time and then eventually adjust gradually over a period of time. We could adjust and change the course of this terrible thing that could come into play that affects everyday human lives. But here we are in the year 2022. We're dealing with droughts, more frequent storms of severity, excessive heat, etc., etc. Things that will affect our everyday lives in a major way if we don't begin to take this situation seriously to try to change the course or to stem the tide, if you will. Our everyday way of life, even from the food we eat, the air we breathe, the houses we live in, is all being affected by climate change. And it shouldn't be a partisan issue. This should be very nonpartisan. It should be very much so bipartisan because, this is the planet we're talking about. And it's not just affecting America, it's affecting other countries all around the globe. So it would seem to be a no-brainer that this is a very much bipartisan effort and everybody gets on board. We don't know, what money is left in the climate budget, but it's tiny when it should be, if by any accounts of how to describe it, based on what's going, it should be huge. We're having flash floods. These rains, these large amounts of rain in inches that come down in a short period of time. They're happening more and more frequently. Me and my wife were just talking about the event that happened in Kentucky here a couple of weeks back, and I was telling her that this is going to gradually affect more and more people, not just one region of people. And just yesterday, we had a torrential downpour here in the city of Jacksonville, Florida, where we reside, and lo and behold, there was a hospital parking lot over on the southeast side, somewhere to that effect. And the whole parking lot just flooded and changed, the course of people's lives in just that short amount of time, as far as unexpected financial expenses in the form of having to get their car fixed, having to get another car, because the parking lot was not full of cars, but it had a reasonable amount of vehicles parked in it, and they were all flooded out. Some that sat up higher, of course, survived, but the low riders, the Hondas, or the cars that sit kind of low to the ground, they pretty much wiped out. And so, there is climate change at its finest, just from Kentucky to Jacksonville in a matter of weeks. And You know, we what we once thought we were talking about the future, somewhere, something that we can kick the can down the road, you know, and you know, our grandchildren can deal with it, or we'll set it up, you know, to give them a blueprint on how to deal with climate change. It's right here now in our everyday lives. These once in 100-year storms are becoming more frequent. They're becoming more and more frequent. The CO2s that we're putting into the air is slowly but surely killing our way of life and killing us. Big oil, big coal. I mean, it had its time and place during the Industrial Revolution. It had its time and place. And this is not going to be an easy switch. We understand that. But as I said, with a bipartisan effort, we would hope that our local lawmakers will pull their heads out of the sand and start to take this issue seriously. Because of the domino effects that it has on our everyday lives. It is a serious issue. It's a clear and present danger. It's a threat to national security if we don't get a hold on climate change and do something to try and combat the fact that tons of ice are melting and it's causing sea level rise, among other things that I've just aforementioned. So it's a serious issue here. And we as Americans, once again, you know, we can and should take the lead on this issue. We can and we should take the lead on the issue of climate change. But now it's come to the point where, you know, it's like we as Americans and creatures of comfort, it's like we become addicted to a certain way of life and we can't change when we see that what we're doing is harmful to ourselves. You know, it's like we become so addicted to our ways of life that we don't want to let go or adjust. But it's vitally important that we do. It's vitally important that we do. Historic droughts affects not just, it's not going to just affect the West Coast, but what, you know, what usually affects one in America affects us all. What usually affects one affects us all. So, you know, let's really get a grip on what's going on. How do we do that? Well, you know, going along with the science. And that's everything from what we can do to reduce our CO emissions to what, you know, course we could take right now as everyday Americans, you know, how you use electricity in the home, you know, where you can cut back on that. If you could bike to work, if you could carpool, you know, more green space. These are things that we can do that are within our power to cut CO2 emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere. There's more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere right now than at any time in human history. And we're on the path to exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. It seems like a small amount, but it's not in terms of the heat that the sun can let off in this new era of climate change. And heat-related illnesses will surely be on the rise. Any heat-related illnesses will surely be on the rise, especially for people who work outdoors, our seniors. And these heat waves You know, as I said, along with flash floods, it's a rapid occurrence there, and it's time for action. The science doesn't lie. As I heard the former president say here not too long ago, we're using the Earth's atmosphere as our sewer. And, you know, everything has a breaking point. It's not, the Earth will shake it off and readjust. But humans, we don't have that luxury. We don't have that luxury. The Earth is our mother. And however she goes could very well dictate how we go. And these extreme heat events have become more and more frequent. They become more and more frequent. So, what are we supposed to do in the summertime? Are we supposed to stop work? Are we willing to risk shutting down the American economy by having to stop work, having to cancel events, having to scale back in any kind of way? Everybody needs to play their part and take it serious. Just because it hasn't happened in your neighborhood as of yet, just because it hasn't happened to a direct relative or a close friend and it hasn't affected them yet, we need to take it serious and be proactive now more than ever. We need to be proactive now more than ever because of the domino effect that inaction will continue to cause, you know, irreparable harm to the planet and affecting every bit of human life, every living and breathing thing, whether man or beast, on the planet. On the planet, not just here in America, but all around the world. We are seeing these effects. The year 2020 was one of the hottest years recorded on record. What about strong consideration, taking a strong look at the science behind also solar panels, wind turbines? Are we going to ignore or try to make these things null and void or cease to exist because of fear of losing money? We have to take a long look at the science, as this is some of our best hope to combat climate change. Electric vehicles, as I said, wind turbines, solar panels. Can we get the lobbyists, you know, up on Capitol Hill, lobbying for legislation on behalf of climate change and stemming the tide of it? We're calling on the party that's in power now to work with the other side, and we're not making it about politics here at Soluble. We're looking for a solution because we're slowly approaching a point of desperation. But if we begin to be more proactive, to make this one of the things at the forefront of our concerns here in America, because the climate change will surely affect the economy. So, you know, whereas, you know, for the most part, it's the economy stupid, the economy won't even exist without a safe earth, a stable earth, a stable atmosphere to produce a functioning economy. So, as I said, we need to, you know, put it at the forefront. We need to put it right up there with the economy, with anything having to do with foreign trade. It's one of the single most important domestic issues that we should be willing to put new legislation on the books, attack it in a way that it becomes law for the things that are put in place to stem the tide of climate change because of the irreparable harm that it's causing and will continue to cause as long as we drag our feet on the issue. We don't want to participate. It can only get worse. The average wildlife populations have dropped by 60% in just over 40 years due to climate change, loss of habitat is one of the main reasons. And this is human activity. This is human activity. Let's not let greed get in the way of common sense. Let's not let greed get in the way of common sense when it comes to climate change. The solutions are out there. We have them. We have them. But it's just up to us as humans if we're able to get out of our own way to stem the tide of this event that's happening that can be controlled. That can be controlled by man. We need water. The human body can go longer without food than it can water. And water is becoming scarcer in more regions. Regions. In this drought, these kind of droughts can, have all kind of domino effects. All kind of domino effects. So where should we be trying to head? What should be the goal here? To, as I said, follow the science when it comes to electric vehicles, solar panels. We can eat more plant-based food, which requires less land, less water. Our electricity consumption in our homes, we can monitor that. We can control that. And as I said, where we can, bike, carpool, to cut down on the CO2 emissions that are being put into the Earth's atmosphere, we ought to gladly take a joy in participating in it, taking it serious. Diseases, storms. And this is something that over time, it affects insurance rates for homeowners. Where does that go from here as the storms become more frequent? And the government can only do so much. The government can only do so much. So, we have to think about that. The heat trapping greenhouse gases are they're harmful on the Earth's climate. And as I said, the Industrial Revolution was a great time in America. It helped catapult America to the forefront on the world stage in the world economy. But that era should be coming to an end. We should all, as Americans, want to pitch in and do whatever it takes to follow the science behind clean energy, renewable energy sources, and do whatever we can, playing our part to make this go from bad, worse to better. So are we ready to play our part there? Are we ready to play our part? Reducing water waste, investing in energy efficient appliances, buying better light bulbs. These are small things that seem laughable, but they play a big role in stemming the tide to trying to slow down the effects of climate change. Who knows how long we have left? Who knows how long we have left with this situation happening if we don't try to stem the tide? What kind of madness can ensue when no one's eating right? Food prices are sky high because as a result thereof. No one can find reliable housing because houses are being blown away, washed away, abandoned due to drought, due to storms. So these are the facts. You can look them up, yourself. To take climate change serious and play your part. Because as I said, we here at Soluble, we know that slowly but surely this will begin to affect us in one way or another. If your house is still standing and hasn't been affected in no kind of way by climate change, then the prices will go up for the things that you need to run an efficient household, to have a functioning household. So you're going to be affected one way or another. Loss of jobs, loss of income will lead to a loss of a way of life. We first, some brushed it off as scare tactics, something imaginary, something that was just being used to create a financial industry for people who were invested in solar panels or wind turbines. But we see now that it's very real because it's playing out right before our very eyes. These once in 100-year storms, these so-called once in 100-year storms, now they're seem to be coming once every month. I am originally a Georgian by birth, and I moved to Florida back in the year 1997. And of course, moving from Georgia to Florida, you can't help but to notice hurricanes and how to begin to look out for them starting in June when the season starts. Something that most Georgians don't really think about, as we're not a much coastal city like that. Like Florida is a peninsula state. But I've noticed over the last, say, 5 years that there's a new turn in, like, you know anywhere from 48 to 72 hours. People thought that there was nothing much to what was coming, and all of a sudden now they're scrambling trying to get out of the way. These are the effects of climate change, and it's going to get even more unpredictable if we don't try to do everything in our power to stem the tide. And everybody can play a part in this. Everybody can play a part in reducing the things that they do personally to put CO2 emissions into the air. Everybody can play a part. As I said, you can Google climate change facts, and it's all right there in black and white. Anything from like I said, from changing our diet, changing the way we commute, changing our our habits of how we use electricity and how often, looking for any kind of way we can to cut back. So there it is. I mean, it's right now going from bad to worse. It's just like it's all the time on the news now. Lake Mead, the water reservoirs over on the West Coast, they're becoming drier and drier. As a matter of fact, I heard on the news today where they put Lake Mead at a certain category that they use when the water level drops so low. Then they put it to a certain category where there's less consumption now. People have to cut back. And this is going to, as I said, continue to affect the everyday lives of Americans if we don't all play our part. So here we are. Will we be addicts who can't control or don't want to change our habits? And it's not just for the sake of our grandchildren anymore, because it's right here upon us. And there's no way to spin it. There's no way to look at it as fear mongering or stuff that's made up, junk science. These are words and terminologies that have been used in the past to describe climate change, to brush it off as nothing but maybe a liberal talking point. The Industrial Revolution served its purpose in the country, in the world. And now we have to adapt. We have to change our way of doing things, or else. It's nothing to sleep on. We can no longer afford to brush it under the rug. I'm a living witness to these rain events where the water rises, just inundating neighborhoods, covering up the streets. You got to be careful how you drive down the street, or the wakes that are created from the vehicle driving through the water. It goes up into people's homes, and then it's over from there. So it's very real. It's very real. Whether you're living in drought-stricken areas, whether you're living in places where there's more intense heat more often, you see how it's affecting everyday life. You're experiencing it as well. And now the question is, what will we do about it? It's not something that has to be here to stay. But now we have to become a more disciplined, more intellectual way of doing things, a more common sense way of doing things, because truly indeed, the facts are there, the evidence is there. There's no longer such thing as a once in 100-year storm. It's more volatile weather now. Everything is more on the extreme side, extreme heat, extreme rain. And as I said, the atmosphere is heating up. There's more carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere than at any other time in human history. Climate change is real. Climate change is devastating people's lives as we speak on this broadcast. So we're asking you to play your part. If you're tuning in to this broadcast or just browsing and happen to come across, really take it to heart. Really take it serious. What can I do? That's the question that we should all be asking ourselves when it comes to climate change. What can I do to stem the tide? To help stop the excessive heat? To maybe change the course on the droughts, the intense rainfall that we're having? Because truly indeed, the atmosphere is becoming more and more volatile. When these systems occur now, they're more violent. They're more intense, causing sickness, disease, hunger, starvation. This is what it looks like in a world that's entering into a serious change of order, a change in the way we have to do things because of what the climate is doing and what it's not doing. So that's our stance on the issue. What is the solution? As we here at Soluble are always looking for, what is the solution? Can we make a difference? Sure, we can. But it's just up to us as human beings, as I said, not to act like addicts who can't turn back. It's very necessary that we do, or we will continue to see, we will continue to see a negative, devastating effect on the norms that we have enjoyed throughout the years. So we're here at Soluble. We're asking all our listeners or anybody who may scroll across this broadcast to do your part in whichever way you can to help stem the tide, to do your part to change the course of history when it comes to climate change. It's sacrifices to be made, of course, but they're necessary sacrifices. It's not easy to adapt from energy sources that we've used for the last 50, 60 years. It's not easy to adapt from that. But now we see that it's necessary. It's necessary. And the number one thing that makes it necessary is our survival. Our way of life as we know it depends on it. So as I said, you can Google climate change facts. You can look up ways to change the course, the ways to slow climate change, and we can all play a part. And we're urging you to please do so. Look into it. Take time out of your busy day to go into the facts about climate change. And most importantly, what can we do as human individuals, as human beings, period, to stem the tide or to try to make climate change not as devastating as it's starting out to be now. It requires change. It requires sacrifice. It requires more than anything commitment. Committing to doing your part. Because as I said, what affects one affects us all. And eventually you will see it, whether it's losing your home, having your property destroyed, losing precious heirlooms. It may become a pocketbook issue. It may become a medical issue. But before it gets there, you can change it. You could do something about it. The question is, we as humans, we have to dig deep and ask ourselves the question and give yourself the answer. What can I do? And when you ask yourself that question, then you do your research. You do your research. It's right there for the reader in you to look into it, to see what you can do to stem the tide of it. And you will be surprised at the changes that you as an individual can make, or that one individual plus two individuals that adds up to all of humankind making a serious change. You will begin to see the change if we all play our part. before it gets too late. Please take it serious, because as I said, if in the year 2022, you may not feel the effects of it. You may not have been affected by it in no kind of way. But if we don't start to play our part and take this changing atmospheric event seriously, then sooner or later it will have an effect on you one way or another. And it will have an effect on all of us as human beings inhabiting this planet. So that's our stand here at Soluble. To have to try and find a solution to stop the effects of climate change, to slow the effects. Let's strive to adapt. Let's strive to have a serious commitment and participation in doing whatever it takes to slow this down, or to maybe even, like I said, stem the tide of it and possibly make it something that is an afterthought, because we all as human beings, not just here in America, but around the world, are willing to actively participate and do the things that we need to do to help ourselves first and foremost. No one other than that, to help humankind, because that's where we're at. This is not a racial thing or a global location thing. This is something for the whole planet and the inhabitants thereof. So this is Soluble signing off. This is our stance on the issue for this Friday, which is climate change. And we hope that you will take it serious, strive to commit to doing whatever you can to help change the course of this, because, shattered lives is not something that, we should tolerate when we can make a difference. It's heart-wrenching to see it on TV, to see people lose everything that they have from generations back, everything that they've worked for, gone in the blink of an eye through some kind of climatic event that we can pretty much prevent or maybe stop altogether if we change what we're doing. So that's where we're at here at Soluble. So we actually need to dig deep, be willing to make the sacrifice. It's not easy to change something that you've been used to doing for years, for decades, but it's now at our doorstep. And so change we must, or be swept up in it in a way that could cause irreparable harm or damage to all humankind here on Earth. So this is Soluble signing off, saying good night. We thank you for tuning in to this issue for this Friday of climate change, and we hope that you would take it serious in order to make the planet more safer, better, and more sustainable for now and future generations. This is Soluble signing off. Good night.